On today's episode, we give you our honest opinion on a new frog that just made a big splash in the market after last month's MLF Heavy Hitters event. We recap the Bassmaster Elite Series at Wheeler Lake, and we answer your fishing questions about ICAST 2024, kayak layouts, and keeping your soft plastics from sliding up and down your hooks. All that and more on this episode of Tackle Talk.
Hello, everybody. I'm Bill Dance, and you're listening to Tackle Talk.
Welcome to the Tackle Talk Podcast, brought to you by American Legacy Fishing and Outdoors. World-class fishing gear, unmatched personal service. Now, here's your host, Andrew Hayes.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another information-packed episode of the Tackle Talk Podcast. Happy belated Father's Day to everybody out there listening. We appreciate you all tuning in today. We've got a great show, but first, none of it would be possible without the support of our great partners, especially the boys over at American Legacy Fishing. ALF is without a doubt my favorite place to order gear from on the entire internet. Why? Well, because they have a great selection. They have a price match guarantee in writing on their website. They have an incredible loyalty program. They have the internet's best selection of high quality used fishing gear, which by the way is 20% off right now. And they run great sales, and they actually care about providing you with incredible customer service and helping educate their customers. Like right now, you can go over to the main page of the website. There's a banner that says Ultimate Topwater Rod. And if you click that, it takes you to a YouTube video that they just recently made with Brian, the VP over at ALF, and he walks you through a handful of their absolute favorite spook rods, all at various price points depending on your budget. You can find all of that and more from our friends over at ALF by going over to www.americanlegacyfishing.com. And as always, you can use code TACKLETALK10. That saves you 10% off almost everything on the website that's either not already on sale or not one of the few exclusions. Everything else, 10% off, amazing customer service, great selection, great prices, fast shipping over at www.americanlegacyfishing.com, code TACKLETALK10. All right, everybody. First things first here this week, we have some fresh results from the Bassmaster Elite Series this past weekend at Wheeler Lake in Decatur, Alabama. So this tournament was held June 13th through 16th, and it was the 6th of 9 regular season Bassmaster Elite Series events this season. So first up, as always, your top 10 in reverse order here. 10th place, Alex Redwine. 9th place, Justin Hamner. 8th was Logan Parks. 7th, Wesley Gore. 6th place, Jay Shakurit. 5th place, Alex Weatherall. 4th, John Garrett. 3rd was John Cox. 2nd place, Ray Hanselman Jr. And your 2024 Bassmaster Elite Series champion at Wheeler Lake is Cliff Prince.
9 down and 1 to go. Let's get him rolling this way. A 14-year Bassmaster Elite Series veteran. 3 times he's been in the top 3. He has been so close before. 15 Bassmaster top 10s. A 3-time Bassmaster Classic qualifier. The Prince of Palatka from Palatka, Florida, Cliff Prince. I'm going to get both these great anglers and great fathers side by side here. He started the day with 65 pounds and 13 ounces. 5 fish here today. His toughest day of the tournament by far. He is looking for 11 pounds and 4 ounces. 15 pounds, 2 ounces. 15-2. And the Prince of Palatka prevails on Wheeler Lake.
So, Cliff Prince in his 145th BASS tournament of his career, a gentleman that fished his first Bassmaster Opens event back in 2008, some, 16, 17 years ago at this point, gets his first career Bassmaster win at Wheeler Lake. And a fun fact about Cliff Prince, he used to be a rodeo cowboy back in his younger years. So at home, he has titles for calf roping, he has titles for steer wrestling, and now he gets to add hog snatching. So congratulations to Cliff, your 2024 Bassmaster Elite Series champ at Wheeler Lake in Decatur, Alabama. All right, everybody, next up here, we're going to do what we do best here on Tackle Talk, or at least what I hope we do best. That's kind of what I want to do with this show in general, and it is give our honest opinion on new products. I love doing it. I love when someone brings something to the market and we get a fresh slate and we get to talk about them and we get to really dive in with an unbiased look at a new product and try and help you decide, is it worth the money or not? And today, that product is going to be the Berkley Swamp Lord frog. Now, why, right? Why are we taking a look at this particular frog, the Berkley Swamp Lord? Well, I think the simple answers as to why we're covering this frog are: one, Jordan Lee won the Major League Fishing Heavy Hitters event last month on this exact frog. Number two, it's fairly new to the market. And number three, frog fishing rules. So those are my three reasons why I want to spend some time today talking about this particular frog. And it ties in well because 2 weeks ago, we did an episode where we broke down 5 tips specifically for frog fishing. And one of the natural questions that we got after that episode aired was, what frog should I use? Well, that question could easily turn into a 5-hour episode about what frog is best, the strengths, the weaknesses of certain frogs from different brands, and which best fits your conditions. So instead, today we're going to hyper-focus on one frog in particular, a frog that's been making waves over the past few weeks since Jordan's victory, where everyone saw him walloping fish on MLF Live. It's the Berkley Swamp Lord. So let's take a look at the basics here. Let's start there. We're going to go over the hard and fast facts about this frog, the parts that cannot be argued, and then we're going to take a look at what Berkley says about this frog, and then we'll take a look at our own experiences with it and what I like and what I don't like. So for starters, here's the write-up directly from Berkley themselves. It says, designed by expert frog fisherman and 2022 MLF Red Crest champion Bobby Lane, this is the last hollow body frog any angler needs to become the Lord of the Swamp. Optimized for positive hookup ratio, the Swamp Lord features optimally angled, sticky sharp Fusion 19 hooks with a supple yet durable body material that easily collapses. Additionally, the sealed hook shank and body chambers reduce water intrusion for uninterrupted fishing. Available in both standard and popping models. And then the features it has listed here says optimized system to increase hookup ratio, ultra soft body and design allowing for quick collapse, sealed hook shank and body chambers reduce water intrusion, optimally angled sticky sharp Fusion 19 hooks, and standard and popping models. So that's like the bullet points that it has under the description. So there's your official description from Berkley. Now the specs on this thing, it is listed at 2.6 inches in length, and then it's listed in weight as 2/3 of an ounce. And it comes in both popping and non-popping variations. It comes in 12 colors, including bone, maverick, MF bluegill, bully, burnt bone, chartreuse perch, copperhead, green pumpkin, honey shad, spring frog, voodoo black, and Potomac. And the price on this frog is $9.99 retail, so just under $10. So this is, pretty simply, a frog from Berkley. Because if you look before the Swamp Lord, Berkley doesn't really have a traditional hollow body frog in their lineup. So I think this is their take on that traditional hollow body frog. That's pretty much it, right? There's not really a whole lot deeper here to dive down on the real reason why they brought this frog to the market. I think Berkley was missing a frog in their lineup, and now they're not. So I'm pretty sure that is why the Berkley Swamp Lord came into existence. And that brings up a bigger point that we can talk about really quickly about new products in general. Is this innovative? Is the Berkley Swamp Lord really innovative? No, it's not, right? Is it earth-shattering? No. Is it even mildly important to the overall grand scheme of things in the fishing industry? No, not really. But a lot of times, this is where new products come from. Oftentimes, they're not some genius in the back room thinking up and designing something that the world has never seen before, something that us peons out here couldn't have even fathomed until they created it behind the curtain and our little brains couldn't handle it. No, it just usually fills a hole in a particular company's product line. This happens all the time. And I think one of the easy things I like to relate things to a lot of times is cars, just because I feel like that's a pretty universal connection to make. So if we want to take a step back, think like when Honda came out with the Ridgeline, right, which is their version of a truck. It's just a Honda truck. Why did Honda come out with a truck? Well, they came out with a truck because they looked out at the world and thought, you know what? Everyone else makes a truck. We don't make a truck. We're missing a truck. People that want to buy Honda cannot buy a truck. We should probably fix that. We should probably make a truck. And no one thought that like this was going to improve human life forever and revolutionize trucks. We must make it. No, it was just, hey, we don't make a truck. We should make a truck. And now if you love Honda, if you're like a diehard Honda fan, every vehicle you've ever bought is Honda, now you don't have to switch brands to buy a truck. Honda makes a truck that you can buy. It's the same thing with fishing tackle. Berkley looked out and said, hey, wait a second. There's 50 other companies out there that make a regular frog. We're a giant company with a big fan base, but when those people that love Berkley want to throw a frog, they can't throw a Berkley frog because we don't make one. We should make one. Boom. Berkley Swamp Lord. I think that's probably where it came from. So, a great example, we just talked about him a few minutes ago. Take Jordan Lee, for instance. Before the Swamp Lord comes out, Jordan is a Berkley angler, right? He's sponsored by Berkley. He throws all kinds of Berkley stuff. Before the Swamp Lord came out, if Jordan rolled up on that grass mat in heavy hitters and found a frog bite, he would have had to use a different company's frog or a different brand of frog for the simple reason there was no Berkley frog. So again, that's probably where this Swamp Lord is coming from. I just want to kind of set off the conversation by saying, I know this is not a revolutionary product, right? This is not something that's blowing minds, but this is the fun part of fishing, is that we get the chance to dissect something that may look like 20,000 other things in the market, but let's find out, right? Where does it shine? Where are its strengths? Where are its weaknesses? Is it worth $10? And really get into the nitty gritty about this particular bait. I love doing that. So let's jump in right here and let's take a hard and fast look at this frog. Now we've got it out of the way, right? This is not a revolutionary product. It's not groundbreaking. It's a frog. But different frogs have different characteristics that make them better or worse in different situations. And for the sake of today's review, we are going to break down this frog using 4 different categories. We're going to use appearance, performance, durability, and value. Now, you guys know, if you've listened to the show for any amount of time, we try not to review products until we've had ample time to fish them hard. We don't just open them up, make 2 casts, and then write a review about them, right? That doesn't do you much good as a consumer. If someone wants to give you an honest review, they need to put the time in. They need to fish this bait hard. They need to catch a lot of fish on it. They need to put it in different scenarios, different conditions, around different populations of fish, and collect a large enough sample size of data, I guess, to make their case for or against that product. So I will tell you, I will be honest, I have fished this frog exclusively over the past 2 months. I have not used any other frogs. This is the only frog I've used. And I think I've learned a lot about it in those 2 months. It's going to help us give an accurate depiction of what this frog really is. So let's start with appearance with this frog. On the appearance alone, this frog is up there with some of the best that I own. Overall, look of this frog is great. The paint jobs are really consistent. The plastic is a high quality. The legs are unique. We'll get to in a minute. I do like this frog right out of the box. And Berkley always does a good job with paint jobs and with appearance and artwork. The art on their lures is usually awesome. They're obviously known for those like HD patterns, really consistent professional designs and look to them. So this frog is no exception in that realm. I think even if you are a Berkley hater, you probably have to tip your hat to Berkley that the appearance and the colors and the artwork on their baits is usually pretty solid. So some of my favorite colors and my favorite looks of these frogs, the Maverick color is awesome. It's all black with like a little bit of purple flake in it, yellow eyes, all black legs, black stomach, just your quintessential dark black frog with really tiny purple flares in it. Then you have Voodoo Black, which is really cool if you want a black frog with like some bright yellow yellow or chartreuse accents in it. Spring frog is another good one. Bully is another good one. Those are your more traditional colors of your frogs with them, even though both of those feature more of like almost like a pretty white or neutral belly versus your traditional yellow. So my one complaint about the colors is that usually when I think of a traditional frog, a regular colored frog, I think of that green and yellow belly. And there is only 1 out of 12 frogs in this lineup that has a belly that even remotely looks like that, and it's called chartreuse perch. So not my favorite color on top. In fact, probably one of my least favorite top colors of these frogs, like the part that's not under the water, the part that's just above the water that we see. Not really my favorite, right? But if you're looking for the one that has like a, yellowish belly to it, this is the only one that's out there in these 12 colors. And really, I think, again, we've talked about this before, the belly is the main color that matters. Yes, you can make the argument that when you're walking that frog or when it darts, you kind of have that frog dip to the right or to the left, and that fish might be able to see some of the top color as it makes a move. But overall, when a fish is staring this down from underwater, the belly color is what matters. And again, I just have a little bit of a gripe that of 12 colors, I didn't really get that super natural or at least like traditional color that I was looking for of like greenish yellow on that belly. So summarize there, they have some awesome colors if you're looking for some more unique options, but I do think Berkley missed the mark here in terms of an uber natural or traditional frog that has that yellow underside that I was looking for. But overall, appearance-wise, very nice frogs, cool patterns, a very, very consistent look and feel to every single frog. All right, everybody, we'll get back to the episode here in just a second, but before we do, we are brought to you in part by Mossy Oak. And while it's true that Mossy Oak makes some of the best hunting apparel on the planet, they also have an incredible line of fishing apparel designed for tough days on the water. And right now, here in Ohio, it's like 98 degrees outside, full sun, feels like 105, and you just can't be out all day on the water without the right gear, or you're going to burn. And I used to be the guy that was miserable. I was sunburnt all the time because I'd rather wear short sleeves and stay cool than wear long sleeves and avoid the sunburnt but be miserable and hot. But now with Mossy Oak's tech line, I don't have to make that choice. Now I wear Mossy Oak tech shirts, and they're super lightweight. They keep me cool all day long while still protecting me from the sun. I honestly don't understand how it works, but it does. The long sleeve shirts feel cooler than if you're wearing a regular short sleeve shirt. It's the beauty of that Hydroplex technology they have. They feel great, but most importantly, they help me fish longer, they help me fish harder, and be more productive out there on the water. So head over to www.store.mossyoak.com, click fishing at the top of the page to see their full line of apparel, and be prepared for those long summer days on the water. Again, that's www.store.mossyoak.com. So next up here, we have performance. And this is the meat and potatoes of any review, right? Does this frog perform, and how does it compare to other frogs out there? So my extremely simple answer whenever someone asks me from here on out about the Berkley Swamp Lord is going to be, it's heavy and it's soft. So let's start with the heavy, right? This frog is listed at 2/3 of an ounce, and darn it if this doesn't feel like every bit of 2/3 of an ounce when you cast it. This might be the heaviest frog in my whole box, bar none. I mean, think of some of the more popular frogs on the market. A Booyah Pad Crasher is, I think, a 1/2 ounce at the biggest size. The biggest Guggen frog is like 5/8. The biggest Spro Bronzeye is 5/8. So the Swamp Lord is heavier than every single one of those frogs we just mentioned. This 2/3 of an ounce frog is probably one of the heavier frogs on the market, period. Right off the top of my head, the only ones I can think of that are really that heavy, maybe like the River to Sea Bullywah, maybe. I think that's probably right around this weight, but not a ton of others. So this is an objectively heavy frog, like on a scale and in its specs, it is a heavy frog, but also just in terms of casting and working this frog, it performs heavy too. Now, that's not necessarily a good or bad thing. I think it all depends on the situation and your personal preferences. So a heavy frog can be a really good thing if you want to create some commotion the second that frog hits the water. We've all been there, right? You get smoked by a fish as soon as that frog lands, and there was just something where, that, again, commotion where that frog, bam, hit the water, and then boom, you get engulfed. If you're trying to do that, you're trying to have a more noticeable landing than a lighter frog, I can vouch that this frog does that. So a positive if you're looking to get noticed, I think just a negative in that aspect if you're trying to be stealthy. Now, the biggest positive, I think, with this frog in terms of its weight is that it casts a gosh darn country mile. I mean, you can send this frog on a one-way trip to Mars if you want to. So that means you don't necessarily have to drop down to like a 50-pound braid to get your extra casting distance like sometimes a lot of guys do when they drop from 65 to 50 just so they can cast a little further. I would probably say that I can cast this Berkley Swamp Lord farther on 65 than I can cast a bronzeye or some of my other go-to frogs on 50. It would be really close. So if you're a bank guy or gal, if casting distance is the big priority, then this might be a frog worth checking out. Now, the first thing we mentioned when we said this frog had two main points to hit was that it was heavy. Check, we got that one out of the way. The second one is that it's soft. Now, this is a little bit more subjective, right? Because there's no real spec listed on a frog's box for softness like there is for weight. But when you pick this frog up, when you fish it, when you squeeze it, it is a very soft, easily collapsing frog. And some frogs are just stiffer right out of the package, and that's why you hear about some guys boiling them to soften them up. Trust me, you do not need to boil the Berkley Swamp Lord. It is plenty soft right out of the box. So the positive is that getting this frog to collapse on the hook set and expose those hooks is no problem. So if you're having problems with hookups when you're fishing a Berkley Swamp Lord, I would seriously doubt that it's a collapsibility issue getting those hooks to expose. I don't think that's going to be an issue you're ever going to have with this frog. Very, very easy to get those hooks to expose and penetrate that fish's mouth. Now, the negative side of a soft frog is that if you're around super thick weeds, super thick vegetation, and you're putting this frog in crazy places, I've had some issues with hang-ups because a thicker, tougher frog makes it a little harder for those hooks to expose on a hook set. That might be true, but it also makes it harder to expose those hooks to vegetation, to grass, to snags. So it's a double-edged sword. Because with this frog, you're going to have less issues with hook penetration on fish, but that means more issues with hook penetration on things that are not fish, like reeds, pad stems, tree limbs, things like that. So you super, super heavy duty cover guys, this frog might give you more headaches than some other frogs on the market. It just depends on what's most important to you. Do you want easier hookups but easier to snag? Or do you want a little tougher hookups but also a little tougher to snag? That's your choice with frogs. But the other two pieces of this frog really fast that I don't want to gloss over when we talk about performance are the hooks and the legs. And the hooks on this frog are super sharp. They're those no-nonsense Fusion 19s. They're tough as nails. I've had zero issues with these hooks themselves. Again, the Fusion 19s are one of those things, if you hate Berkley, if you like to give Berkley a bunch of crap, even those guys will say the Fusion 19s are good hooks. So it comes with great hardware inside the frog, and then the legs are extremely thin rubber strands, unlike some other frogs that have a thicker leg material. And what I saw as I was fishing this frog over and over again is that I had less short strikes that were actually able to take that frog under the water by the legs. So instead, when I got short struck with this frog, the frog kind of stayed on top of the water because those legs are so thin that I just think fish had a harder time pulling that frog down just by the legs. So those small squeakers, those tinier fish that just kind of short struck it didn't fool me as often. But overall, speaking of short strikes though, I did have quite a few short strikes on this frog over the past couple months while I was fishing it. And I'm not positive, but I think it's just because it's a little bigger of a profile. It is a big, wide, heavy frog. So it's a little tougher, I think, for those smaller fish to choke. It's a little bigger of a task to actually eat than a more finessey frog. So it seemed like I had a lot of fish try and eat it and miss on the first try, and then they'd come back and then they would actually suck it down and I would actually get to set the hook. But if I would have just swung on that first one, I would have missed on those fish, clear short strikes. But that was just my experience experience. But then on the flip side, I was getting bigger quality bites on this frog than I do with some of my more finessey frogs. So if I got a fish, if it took it down, I was catching a lot of 3s, 3.5s, 4s, which for around me is pretty good fishing. And I even took this frog up to New York when I went up and fished with Bailey a couple weeks ago. I was using this frog up there too. Again, the quality of fish that I was getting on this frog were great. And I think it's probably just because, again, it's a little bigger profile. This is a bully of a frog. This is not a tiny little finesse frog. So performance-wise, your recap there really quickly is it's got good hooks, it's got really thin legs, it's heavy, and it's soft. Now, if we want to go to durability, you guys know durability is super important to me, and everything that I do and all the gear that I buy, I want my gear to last. So overall, I'm going to give this frog a B for durability. It's held up really well. I've fished the same frogs for 2 months. It's not like I started fishing them, I wore a couple out, and then I switched to new ones so that I could keep fishing them all month and 2 months long. No, I'm using the same frogs that I started out with. I started out with about 3 of them. I'm still fishing those 3 frogs. I have not had a single frog yet that's completely let me down to where I have to pitch it and start over with a new one. I'm using those same frogs. Yes, they start to wear out a little bit, right? They're starting to let a little bit more water in than they did at first. That's going to happen with any frog that you ever buy. The more fish that you catch on it, those areas that used to be a little bit more watertight now aren't quite so watertight because you just have a little bit of natural stretching with that soft plastic. That's going to happen. Yes, I've had some color flaking on them a little bit. Again, that's to be expected when you're letting this frog just get ravaged by fish over and over again. You're putting it in crazy weeds and crazy situations. Frogs are heavy duty fishing. So overall, these frogs have held up very well. Yes, some fading. Yes, a little bit of water getting in, but overall, I'm really happy with how they've lasted. Now, last but not least here is going to be value. At $9.99, is this frog a good value? I think that's the most important question that we can ever answer in a product review. Is it worth your hard-earned money? And I'm going to say here that yes, the Berkley Swamp Lord is worth your money if you're looking for a big, heavy frog. If you're looking for a small, finessey frog, I think there are other options on the market that are better for you. For instance, a Booyah Pad Crasher. Again, we talked about it a couple times in this review. It's smaller, it's lighter, it's cheaper. But if you're a bank fisherman, if you're out there and casting distance is the name of the game, or if you're just not intimidated by a little bigger, heavier frog, at $9.99, the Berkley Swamp Lord is a good deal. Your other frogs out there on the market are often more expensive than the $10 Swamp Lord. If you look at a Spro Bronzeye, it's $12. If you look at a Jackal, it's $13. If you look at a Snag Proof, it's $11. I think the River to Sea Bullywah is $11. Strike King is $11. So the Swamp Lord comes in at $1, $2, $3 cheaper than a lot of the frogs on the market that are really popular. Really, the only frogs I can think of off the top of my head that are cheaper than the Swamp Lord, you've got the Pad Crasher at $7. You've got the Guggen Filthy Frog, which I think is $9. You've got Reaction Innovations that makes a $9 frog, and then the old Scum Frog is like between $5 and $8. So value-wise, yes, I think the value is there at $9.99 at a sub $10 bait. Yes, I think it's worth the money. So there's your rundown on the Berkley Swamp Lord in terms of appearance. The positives, I would say it's got a great design, consistent coloring. It's a good-looking frog out of the box, but the negatives, it's just missing that option for a natural, more yellow-bellied version of this frog. Performance-wise, it's got good hooks on it. It's got a uniquely thin material for the legs. It's very heavy, so you can cast it a mile. It causes a lot of commotion on the initial landing, and it's a very soft, easily collapsing frog, but it does tend to pick up more weeds and get snagged a little bit easier than some of my other frogs. If we go to durability, it's held up well over the past 2 months, some slight wearing out of the openings and starting to let a little bit more water in, a little bit of color fading, but all of that is to be expected. And value-wise, I really think the value is there at the $9.99 price point, right there at the middle to lower end of most frogs on the market. And because you're listening to Tackle Talk, because we always try and save you money, right now, the Berkley Swamp Lords did get in stock at American Legacy Fishing. So wanted to make sure I mentioned that for you. If you do want to pick up Swamp Lords, I can save you even a little bit more money. 10% off Swamp Lords with code TackleTalk10 over at American Legacy. That makes them $9.10, which is an even better deal than their normal retail price. So again, code TackleTalk10 for 10% off. If you want to try a Berkley Swamp Lord, they're over at AmericanLegacyFishing.com. All right, everybody, we'll get back to our episode here in just a second, but first we are brought to you in part by Dakota Lithium Batteries. And if you take one look at my batteries, you're going to see that I'm insanely tough on my gear. They're scraped up, they're dirty, they're faded, because I buy batteries to perform, not to look pretty. Same thing with my rods, my reels, my baits, all my fishing gear. The things that matter most to me are performance and durability. And I can confidently say that after years now of running Dakota Lithium batteries, they're my go-to choice for batteries because of those two exact reasons. They work when you need them to every single time, and they put up with the abuse and the harsh conditions that I put them through day in and day out. With Dakota Lithium, I can focus less on my batteries and more on fishing. So if you want your own Dakota Lithium batteries, all you have to do is go to www.dakotalithium.com, and even better, you don't have to pay full retail price. That's because here at Tackle Talk, we try and save you money any chance we can. The boys over at Dakota Lithium gave us the code TACKLETALK10 so we can save you 10% off the best batteries in the business. Again, that's code TACKLETALK10 over at www.dakotalithium.com, the official lithium battery of Bassmaster. All right, everybody, and finally here, we are going to get into our latest edition of the Mailbag, powered by Dakota Lithium.
This is the Tackle Talk Podcast Mailbag, powered by Dakota Lithium Batteries. Adventure awaits at dakotalithim.com.
All right, the first question here is from Jeremy Littner, and he says, "Hey, Andrew, I'm writing you on June 2nd, which means we're less than 2 months away from this year's ICAST show. My question is simple. I assume that after multiple years of running Tackle Talk, you now have connections within the industry from multiple companies, and you probably hear rumblings of new products before the public does. Do you have any spoilers you can tell us about, or any hints about what could be coming out at this year's ICAST? Thanks, Jeremy." Oh boy, we're starting out with a heater of a question here for the mailbag. Thanks, Jeremy. I appreciate it. So I'm going to start out by saying that yes, you are correct. Over the past 4 or 5 years, we have been lucky enough to meet and develop some really great relationships with folks from a lot of different major tackle companies, because we're able to have this unique relationship with them because we don't work with any of them. We don't have any sponsors that are bait companies, rod companies, reel companies, line companies, like specific brands. We don't work with specific brands, which means, one, we can be honest with our reviews about all of the products we talk about, just like we did earlier with the Swamp Lord. I can tell you what I like, what I don't like, because we aren't sponsored by Berkley, like some other people would be, right? Where you would be a little bit more inclined to talk positively about something, to tell people what the company wants you to hear. We don't really have to do that, which is a cool part about the show, and it does let us have this kind of good relationship with a lot of people versus a great relationship with one company here because we're sponsored by them. So the other thing is we don't seek out free products for promotion or reviews like other people do. So again, we get to be brutally honest with what we talk about. So that means we are technically allowed to say whatever we want, whenever we want. So theoretically, you would be right. If we found out about some new product information or things that were going to be released here soon that haven't hit the public yet, maybe I got some texts from some of my friends telling me about things, maybe I heard from some of the pros we know, maybe some people sent me some pictures of some new products that we probably weren't supposed to see yet, we would be free to report it and break that news because we are a media outlet. That's our job. But here is the big but, right? Capital B-U-T. Over the past few years that we've done this show and we've kind of got into a groove here, and I've kind of found what I think hopefully is our lane, I think I have a pretty unique take on this, which is that I don't want to be the person to break news or to spoil things and be the first to report information that companies aren't ready to announce yet. And why wouldn't I want to do that? Well, because I don't believe it's my job to do that, right? I actually believe that it's their right, the company's right, to announce new products that they've been working hard on, not mine. Which means if they've spent 2 years making a certain product, they should get to control how that product is announced and shown to the public for the first time. That debut is their honor, not ours. We shouldn't be trying to beat them to the punch. So I know that's an odd take from a media outlet, because almost every other media company, every other podcast, every other YouTuber would probably say, no, of course I want to be the first person to report something or bring it to the masses, because that means more views, more downloads, downloads, more traffic, more money eventually for usually people in this game. But I don't think that we should be in the business of trying to spoil product launches for companies. I want to be in the business of dissecting those new products and giving my honest opinion on them in layman's terms about whether or not I think they're worth the money or not. So that's a very long-winded way, I guess, of saying, yes, Jeremy, I do know about some things that are coming out this year at ICAST. I've seen, again, pictures I'm probably not supposed to see yet. I've been emailed and texted some spoilers and some products that are going to be coming out that are going to be turning some heads, but it's not our job to play spoiler. It's our job to review products, to talk about baits and techniques and tips that hopefully make you a better angler in the long run. So I'm pretty sure that's not like the juicy answer that you were hoping for, but I do enjoy giving you guys a little bit more of a transparent look about how this show is run, how we make certain decisions on what to talk about and what not to talk about. And if that information is not out to the public yet and the company doesn't want it out yet, I'm not going to be the one to spoil it. Now, if someone else spoils it and they put it out there in the world already and they kind of ruin everything, then it's fair game because someone else spilled the beans. It's already out there. People know about it and we can start to talk about it. But until then, unfortunately, no, there are not going to be any spoilers from us, but I can almost guarantee you that in the next couple weeks, things will start to trickle out information-wise and product-wise about 2024 things at ICAST. All right, the next question here is from Lee Huff, and he says, "Hey, Andrew, I just ordered a shirt, and I just wanted to let you know that I appreciate the signed card that was enclosed. Really personable and impressive. My question is about knots, specifically for braid to fluoro. What knot, in your experience, is the best to use in terms of strength and ease of tying? I myself use a uni to uni, but I feel that it isn't the strongest, although it's simple to tie. Longtime listener, love the podcast, and as always, give them the beans." Well, thanks, Lee. I appreciate the message. I appreciate the shirt order. I hope you like it. And to answer your question here, I think this is actually a pretty simple one for me, at least. I'm just like you. I use a double uni and then I forget about it. I have never, ever had an issue with my double unis breaking or failing me unless I was doing something stupid or I was trying to get myself unsnagged and trying to break off or something like that, or stupidly not retying when you can clearly see that your line's starting to fray, that kind of stuff. Then I'll have some issues. But when tied correctly, a double uni is a great braid to fluoro knot. I firmly stand by that. I will not let anybody else tell me differently. It is quick. It is strong. It comes through your guides just fine. I have no issues with a double uni, so I would stick with that if it were me. All right, the next question here is from Tyler Lidget. I think I said that right. I'm sorry, Tyler, if I butchered that, but Tyler Lidget. And he says, "What is your opinion on having all of your rods be from one company? I would really like to have an arsenal full of all Fenwick rods due to the family flex. If you have any other recommendations, please share. Thank you, Tyler." Hey, Tyler. So in full disclosure here, I'm going to be completely honest. My opinion on this answer has changed over the past 4 or 5 years. If you go back and you listen to the beginning of Tackle Talk, I would probably tell you that I like all of my rods coming from one company because I liked the consistency. I liked knowing that there wasn't a giant difference from company to company and I could focus more on fishing. But as years go by, as I get the chance to play around with more gear and try more things, I really firmly believe the opposite now. I think that if you want to build the best arsenal across multiple techniques, there is a lot of merit to diversifying your rod lineup. So for instance, I love Dobbins rods, but I have never ever found a Dobbins rod that I absolutely loved for jerkbaits, for instance. I've had rods that were okay for jerkbaits, like a 703, a 733, whatever, but none that I really fell in love with. Meanwhile, over the past 2 years, I've found 2 rods that I absolutely love for jerkbaits, but they're from 2 completely different companies, one from Fenwick and one from Shimano. The Shimano X-Pride B, it's the 610 medium moderate fast, the casting rod, is an awesome jerkbait rod. And then the Fenwick World Class, it's a 6.8, it's a little bit shorter, medium moderate fast. Both of those are amazing jerkbait sticks, and they would kick the snot, I think, out of any Dobbins that I've ever owned for jerkbaits. Now, the X-Pride, in full disclosure, is $280. The World Class is $400. $420 from Fenwick. So they're up there in price, but still, I am glad that I didn't hold myself to one brand, or else I wouldn't have had the option of even finding either of those two rods. And that goes across my whole lineup now, right? My favorite spinning rod in my lineup is from G Loomis. My favorite A-rig and my glide bait rod now is from Megabass. My favorite bottom contact rods are still Dobyns Champ XPs. For the money, I don't think they can be beat. My favorite frog rod is the Dobyns Fury. I just got a new all-around rod from Daiwa that I'm really digging right now that we'll talk about here in a couple weeks. I'm running like 7, 8, 9 different brands of rods now at any given time, and I think it's made me a better angler because of it. So to answer your big question, no, I don't think it's necessarily a positive to have all of your rods from one company, because I think there are different companies that just make better rods for certain techniques, and if you stick with one brand of rod, you might miss out on those great rods that would be a good fit for you. So that's at least my preference. Now, with that being said, if I was going to stick to one rod company for all of my rods, the new Fenwicks are a great choice because of that family flex and because I've been thoroughly impressed with every new Fenwick that I've picked up over the past 4 or 5 months. Fenwick and Dobyns would still be my two main choices if I had to stick with just one brand for my rods. All right, the next question here is from John Abrams, and he says, "Hey, Andrew, I'm trying to find a solution to keep my soft plastics from sliding up my hooks so much. I notice it mostly with swim baits on a belly-weighted hook and with Texas rigs when the tail end slides up on the hook bend, leaving the point exposed and having to adjust it every few casts. I know that I can Texpose, but that only lasts so long, and I don't want to super glue that part so it can still move when I get bit and I need to set the hook. I found these bait pegs made by Harmony on Amazon that look like a solution, but I was wondering if you've ever tried them or any other suggestions. Thanks for all the content. Tight lines. P.S. Shout out to all the Ohio anglers." Well, hello there, John, from a fellow Buckeye State brother. I appreciate you writing in. So it sounds like you are asking about keeping specifically a swim bait, but also Texas rigs from sliding up or down the hook, especially on those weighted swim bait hooks. So I don't usually have too much trouble with this because I do Texpose almost everything I do, like you're talking about. And then when it does, poke back through, I just keep burying it deeper and deeper, fish after fish. But if you're still having trouble, there are a few things you can do. The most normal thing I think you can do is take a little piece of like plastic or rubber or, jig collar material, little rubber tubing, something that you can poke through that hook point. And then kind of like you said with these bait pegs, right? I think it's kind of the same idea. You're going to put the first part of your swim bait on, slide it all the way up to where the line tie is, that first part before you feed the hook point back through the second time. You're going to poke that little piece of plastic through, thread it up on your hook, and then finish rigging your bait, and then slide that little piece of plastic back up to the bottom part of your soft plastic. And that way, it kind of keeps it pinned up there and it doesn't allow it to fall down the hook. So that sounds like what you're talking about with those bait pegs, but you can use almost anything. Rubber, plastic, jig collars, whatever you got laying around. I've seen people use like pieces of straws and all kinds of stuff before. Just something to poke through to give a little bit of resistance to keep that soft plastic from sliding down. Now, the other thing you can do, I've done this before, it's probably not the best solution, but it worked in a pinch for me, and it was a little bit more, I don't want to call it permanent, but something that you didn't have to keep fixing all the time. So when I was rigging swim baits on a weighted swim bait hook and they kept falling down, I would rig it like normal, and then I would make a mark with a Sharpie where I actually wish I could have had a peg right there to keep that swim bait up right there at the bottom of the soft plastic. Then you take your soft plastic all the way off, and I would just use like epoxy, like DevCon 2-ton or whatever you can get at like Home Depot or Lowe's or wherever. And then I would make a dab of that epoxy on the hook. And I would just do it on either the back end or the front end. It doesn't really matter. Just one side of that hook where I made that mark with the Sharpie. And what it does is you build up like a little bump that hardens on that hook. And then that way you have something there that, you thread it over. And then when you finish, putting your soft plastic on, it just has a little bump there that makes it a little bit harder for that swim bait to fall down. So it's a little bit more permanent of a little bump on that hook to just keep it pinned a little bit better. I don't know if that works for everybody. It did work for me back in the day. The last time I did it was probably 2 years ago or so. So I haven't done it very often since then, but it was something that worked, and it just kind of helped me have a little bit of a stopper there to keep my soft plastic swim bait up on that hook. So other than that, you can keep Texposing it. I think that's something that works a lot. I know it's annoying. I know everybody hates rebearing that all the time, but it is something that's tried and true and it works. Or you can just put something on that hook to keep a little bit of pressure up on that soft plastic. So I hope that helps. And then the last question here is from Jimmy Wallhanger, and it's pretty long, so I'm going to shorten this a little bit, but I promise you, Jimmy, if you're listening to this, I read the whole thing. Thank you so much for everything you wrote in. But the shortened version of this says, "Hi, Andrew. Been meaning to write you for a while now. I love your podcast and really appreciate your unbiased information on tackle and gear. I especially enjoy the follow-up baits episode, and I've used that tip to catch a ton of jumbo perch on my fishery. I use a small MEPS, and then when I see a bunch, I whip out my trusty pumpkin seed tube on a 136-ounce head. You have an excellent way of communicating and speaking clearly, and even though I have a gutter mouth, I appreciate that you never curse. I'm hoping in the future you can do an episode or a series on how weather and conditions affect bass habits and how seasonal patterns develop. I live in southern Ontario, and our season starts the third weekend of June, so I don't really get a chance or an opportunity to fish anything other than post-spawn and summer and fall. Thank you for all the hard work you put into the podcast. I really appreciate it. P.S. We need a Billy Strings Part 3, brother." Well, hey, Jimmy, I really appreciate the kind words, man. Again, I know I had to cut a little bit out for time here, but I do appreciate you writing in. I appreciate the suggestion. First off, yes, the deep dive into weather conditions or seasonality, I think that could be a ton of fun. We've talked loosely about some of that stuff here and there, but a full deep dive into things like barometric pressure, seasonality, water temp, moon phases, wind, water clarity, all of those things, and focusing more on the biological response to those outside variables, I think that could be a ton of fun. So I appreciate that. I'm gonna have to do some digging now and kind of figure out who would make the most sense to talk to on those. But I'm also glad the follow-up bait episode was helpful. I think that's something that we hear a lot about and we think sounds like a good idea, but then when we get out on the water, we just turn into stubborn dudes and we keep throwing the same thing at the same fish and we don't actually break out the follow-up bait. So that is a great 1-2 combo that you said, by the way. A MEPS and a tube is like smallmouth, panfish, all that kind of stuff. It's candy to them. And the last thing that I really wanted to just take a second and sort of highlight here is something that I don't think we've ever explicitly talked about here on the show, but I do think it's important, and you're not the first person to bring this up, but I do appreciate that all of you appreciate that we don't cuss on the show, or at least I don't cuss on the show, right? Some of the guests might let one rip every once in a while. I usually do try and edit them out, so there have been plenty of cuss words that I've taken out of shows before, but every once in a while you just have one that the sentence doesn't make a whole lot of sense if I take it out or I try and put something else in. It just doesn't really work. So there may be a few that have been left in over the years, but I do try and edit those out now at this point. But funny enough, that's not something that I purposefully did like at the beginning of Tackle Talk. I didn't sit down and say, you know what, on this show, we're not going to cuss. It just sort of happened because as we built this show and as more and more people started listening and writing in, it was really evident that there are so many young people, so many kids, so many parents that listen to the show with their kids, and it's become like, a tradition and they bond together and that type of thing, that I wanted to make sure I didn't ruin that chance for those folks. So we did make the conscious decision probably about a year or two ago is when I really, noticed it. And I was like, I am going to make sure that I do not cuss on this show and that hopefully other people and guests really don't cuss on this show either, because I want it to be something where kids and parents can listen together, something that parents don't have to worry about their kids listening to. I want this to be something for everybody. But as weird as this is going to sound, I'm just glad that you guys are cool with that, because fishing is a very, testosterone-filled, good old boys club type of activity a lot of times, and most of the other shows that you listen to, it's like dudes talking with their buddies, right? So bad words are going to fly. They're going to talk like most people talk in their private life. And I was afraid when I actually did make the choice to say, you know what, we're not going to cuss on this show, I was afraid it might be a little too straight-laced for some people and turn people away, but that hasn't been the case. So I just want to say a big thank you to everybody for respecting that part of the show. I know I'm guilty of it in my personal life. A lot of times I think cuss words are just lazy fillers in conversation when you could easily think of something better, a more articulate way of getting that point across. I'm guilty of it, but I wanted to make sure that we keep that out of this show. So a little bit of a diatribe there, I apologize. But yes, to get back to your original point here, we do need to find somebody to do a deep dive with on weather, seasons, environmental factors, things like that. I think that could be really cool. All right, everybody, that is our episode today. Thank you guys so much for listening. I appreciate each and every one of you. As always, if you can go on Apple and Spotify, if you can subscribe, if you can leave us a review, that helps us a ton. Find us on the internet, tackletalkpodcast.com. There you can submit your own mailbag question for your chance to be heard on an upcoming episode. As always, you can email us, tackletalkpodcast@gmail.com. We're on Instagram, we're on Facebook, YouTube, wherever you want to find us, and we will see you right back here next Tuesday for another brand new episode of Tackle Talk.
Thank you for listening to the Tackle Talk podcast. Tackle Talk is produced by Andrew Hayes. Copyright 2021. Please subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts.